Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Chelsea Olsen to our show. Chelsea, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, we've been chatting a little before the recording, and I've been telling you that I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn. You have some great advice, and we're going to get into those. But before we get going, it'll be great if you would please take a minute and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Chelsea Olsen. For those of you that don't know me, I train B2B teams how to leverage LinkedIn so they can build a pipeline and close more deals. I'm also a LinkedIn influencer, so you might have seen some of my content.
So, when did you get started, Chelsea?
Well, I technically got started in 2010, which is when I first started using LinkedIn to book meetings, but I didn't open this company until 2017. And that's when I started doing some done for you outbound for clients and training them on LinkedIn and other outbound sales strategies.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, what made you start? Why did you switch over in 2017 and start this?
It's a little bit of a long story, so I'll try to keep it short. I was actually out of the workforce for a couple of years with the birth of my first daughter, and I entered a completely different industry. My background initially was finance. I have a finance degree. I worked in finance and banking. Then I switched over in 2017 when I went back to work into a completely new field, which was the agency space and selling to nonprofits and government agencies. And it was just a whole new world for me. And I needed to learn how to drive business as the head of business development for this ad agency. So I started using LinkedIn a little bit more, and I built out like an entire sales playbook that included LinkedIn and what we now call social selling. And then I realized how well it worked and started teaching other people about it. And it kind of just snowballed into the agency I have now.
That's pretty cool. So, in your mind, what was social selling in 2017, and what do you think it is today?
So I didn't even know the name of what I was doing for so long. It really didn't have a name. I was just trying to get meetings booked. So cold calling, doing cold email, sending mailers, handwritten notes, direct mail at mass if I needed to, conferences, like doing all of it. But I was using LinkedIn primarily as the way to identify and find the prospects to reach out to. And what I would do is I would connect with them on LinkedIn, and I would say, just want to put a face to the name. This is very early on. I didn't have a perfect strategy, but it was a way for me to get in front of people. And when I was doing the cold outreach, for them to see what I look like.
And so, if you think about 2017 to today,
Yeah.
it's been about 8 years. Has that evolved, changed, or is it roughly the same from an outreach wise through LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's definitely changed. The role of content has become so important in a buyer's journey. And LinkedIn has really morphed into a way to support all of the cold outreach you're doing. And it's more important now than ever. To be honest, in 2017, I didn't fully understand how important content was. And especially back in 2010, right? Like I didn't have any content. And I was just leveraging the platform to build relationships, start conversations, pre qualify a bit in the DMs before I had meetings because I wanted my win rate to go up and I didn't want to take unqualified meetings. So I didn't realize honestly how important the content was probably until a couple of years ago, admittedly, maybe like 3 years ago.
And how did you kind of figure that out? Like, what process did you go through? Not that content is important, but like the categories of it, how to
Yeah.
create it, what to create, how to target.
In 2022, I just realized that cold outreach, was tanking a bit. The conversions were going down. I was a very early adopter of AI and automation, and it worked really well from like 2021 to 2022, 2023. But by like the end of 2022, early 2023, it fully declined the conversion rates because everyone started to do the automation and spamming became huge. And I realized like, okay, this isn't working that well. And I took a step back, to be honest with you, and thought to myself, what am I missing here? Like what is it that I need to do? And through a series of just discovery and research, I realized how important content was, and the way people are buying today is different, because when people buy today, they're 70% through their buying decision before they'll ever even speak to sales reps. They consume at least 13 pieces of content. Learning things like this really showed me what a lot of my teams were missing, what I was missing as a founder, and it was that element of content.
And what were, I mean, if you had to kind of summarize in, 3 or 4 like main takeaways. What was not just the transition you made, like what approaches did you take differently? What was new?
Absolutely. But posting on LinkedIn, I mean, that's the most basic one, but not just posting to post, because I was posting for years and no one cared. I wasn't getting any reactions, no engagement, starting conversations. Like, it wasn't doing anything for me. So I had to learn specifically how to create content for LinkedIn. And there is a way to do this. And if you do not understand how to do it, it's just not going to work and it's not going to be effective for you. So I had to go learn all the rules. And I chose to keep my content on LinkedIn. I didn't go to Instagram. I didn't go to Twitter. I just stayed with, one platform and really focused on that for a while. And a lot of businesses can just do that. They can just create content on LinkedIn. It'll fully support and enable their sales team. If they do it, they don't need to go crazy. It's really that simple.
So we'll come back to this. I mean,
Mhm.
most of our audience is in sales and marketing, marketing to and marketing through partners.
Yeah.
So communication is, very, very important. And they're always marketing highly technical products.
Yeah.
So conversations are complex, like our product. But if we go back a little bit to sort of these other channels that you referred to before we get in, what is the difference between like an Instagram audience or a LinkedIn audience, or can you kind of segment the audience by channel, please?
Absolutely. Instagram is more consumer focused. So if you're going B2C, Instagram's a great place to be. LinkedIn is for B2B. And the average user on LinkedIn has a lot more money than Instagram. They keep changing the numbers, but it is a significant amount. So the buyers have more money. And they're there for business. They're not there to buy lip gloss. They're there to buy software, AI, partners, solutions, services. That's what they're on LinkedIn for. And also, to do their own research and to learn. And
From a crossover perspective, so I was having a conversation with Amelia Taylor, and she said, that there are five generations that are showing up at Borg, which I mentioned a little before recording. Also, is that each of these generations, they have a kind of a primary channel, like the way we used to have in the TV days. They kind of go to. So do you think the businesses have opportunities in addition to LinkedIn to, like, if they're outreaching a Gen Z, because a lot of those people are researching products and services, on behalf of their leadership team before they make decision. So how do you reach those audiences in addition to LinkedIn, or you think LinkedIn has a pretty decent coverage?
LinkedIn has a really decent coverage. The other thing you have to think about is you're not really reaching them through your content on LinkedIn. Most of the time, they're not just going to stumble upon you. You're not that awesome. I'm not that awesome. Let's just be real, right? Like, it's really hard to do with social media. So you have to do the outreach and pull them in. So let's say I reached out to you, right? I sent you an email and you were slightly interested in what I said. What I said was clear enough to get you slightly interested. What you would do as a buyer is you would go to my LinkedIn page. That's the first thing you would do is like, who's Chelsea? Why is she emailing me? What is this all about? Once you got there, that's where the content needs to live because we're doing B2B sales. And you would look at my profile, you would see those key content pillars. I always say each profile needs key pieces of content on it to support the buyer. You would look at my page, you would look at mine, you'd look at my brand, and then maybe you'd look at my business. Maybe you'd go to my website. Probably not. A lot of people just stop at the profile. And then if you liked what you saw and you thought I could solve a problem that you have, you would move towards booking a meeting with me. You're not going to, like, in B2B sales, you're not just going to be like on TikTok. I mean, usually, right? It can happen, but you're not going to be on TikTok or Instagram. And then all of a sudden you get all these meetings. I don't care if you're 23, 43, 63. It's not how we see buyers buying B2B products and services.
So when you kind of look at your own growth, not just personally but also socially, being on the channel, when you have your follower growth, is it sort of growing at a same rate, or you see the rate is picking up, or are there things that you're doing, like what is happening with you from a profile perspective?
Well, I don't focus so much on followers, which is not what people think of when they're on social media. They think followers matter. My whole goal was always to educate my buyers. I sell to chief revenue officers, VPs of sales, some CMOs, not much. Okay. More so chief revenue officers. So my goal always was to build my brand in a way that will educate them and educate people who are in sales and on sales teams. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted it to support the outreach I was doing because, that's where my bread and butter has always been. It wasn't to amass some huge following. Now, are followers important? To a certain point, they are. But I have also worked with and had people hire me who have over 100,000 followers and make no money. So followers have never been the goal. But I will tell you, in the past year and a half, I've accumulated around, I would say like 15,000, probably more than that, followers just from my personal brand on LinkedIn.
Just in a year.
Year and a half, because I was creating content for a little while, and like I said, it wasn't getting any type of response and it wasn't supporting me in any way. And I went through all of my connections on LinkedIn and I deleted pretty much all of them. About a year and a half ago, I removed all connections and I started from pretty much scratch, minus the people I actually knew, like people from college, friends, old colleagues, and built this page up to, I think I'm at like 17,000 something now.
What's the reason you removed them? I mean, what was wrong in just being, because I guess they allow you to get to up to 30,000 connections or something, right?
They weren't engaging with my content. So every time I would put content out, so LinkedIn will serve your content to the people you're connected with. If the people you're connected with don't engage with your content, your post is killed. They're going to demote the post. You're going to get no action. You're not going to get any eyeballs on your content. So because the people I was connected with weren't engaging, I said, okay, burn the bridges, burn the boats. We're done here. Let's remove them. Let me have at least, even if I have 100 people and those, people actually engage, I'm going to be in better shape than having 10, 12, 15, 20,000 who don't. And I was in sales for so many years. I've been selling for nearly 20 years. And I amassed a huge amount of connections that really didn't mean anything. They were just, at the time, me trying to connect to sell. So there was no real connection there. And that was the problem. And I was sick of creating content that was just going into a void and getting no action. And I said, let's start over. I mean, honestly, looking back, if I can be honest, I probably think I should have deleted my page completely and just started from a completely new page. A lot of the influencers you see today, that's what they did. They created a page from scratch and they grew more rapidly than I have.
Wow, that's an amazing insight. I wasn't aware
Yeah.
of that. So one thing, from overall numbers that I've seen, there are roughly around a couple of billion users on LinkedIn now, but around 1.5 or 1.6 million people actually create content. And when you look at the number of people that have 100,000 followers or more, that number comes down to like few hundred.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Richard Branson and Bill Gates and Sam
No.
Altman and others, and different class, but in general. So from that perspective, do you think, like, if you think about a pyramid, there's a lot of people competing for attention at a very highly fragmented bottom of this pyramid, while there's some escapes? Or is it like, how does that overall math kind of play out from a creation and breakout perspective? Or do you see certain types of content breaks out independent of who that is?
Well, compared to Instagram, this is the blue sea. If you hear that theory about the blue sea? Okay. Like, to me, I'm like, this is the blue sea. Like, there's barely any competition. You told me 1%, let's say they say 1% of the people who are users of LinkedIn actually create content. Awesome. That's less competition for me. Instagram, it's much, much more. So from that perspective, creating content, you're already in good shape. If you're asking me what type of content rises to the top, do you want me to be like fully honest? Hot girls, hot women. It's like thought leadership instead of thought leadership, right? If you look at it, and the women who are scaling very quickly, or the people that are scaling quickly, they are usually very attractive young females who post pictures of themselves with some type of copy. And then you have another bucket, which is people who have amassed a big following on other platforms, like Gary Vee, right? You're talking about those guys. They have bigger followings elsewhere, so they naturally just get a bigger following on LinkedIn. That's the people who are really crushing it. You have your few outliers, like, there's certain guys who will create content and they have the ability to do a lot with like lead funnels and things like that. And they're coaching about LinkedIn specifically. So if you're talking about LinkedIn, that also rises to the top and they fare pretty well on the platform. But when you're talking about followers, yes, like that's how the big following happens. If you're talking about tech, probably not. Like, not that you can't. There's tech influencers. Jeff Winter's one, But it's just, if you're really, if you have a highly technical product, you're probably not going to amass 100,000 followers in 6 months.
So, I mean, let's say I'm not easy on the eyes. If I'm not in that category, like, what is my strategy on LinkedIn for the rest of us? Like, how do you, like, what is the way to create content, engage people? Because, the first category that you just said, just most of us wouldn't be able to transition into that.
No, and I'm not, I mean, I'm like a middle-aged woman too. Like, I'm not saying like it's working for me. It took me, a year and a half, and I have 17,000. That's not a lot. Trust me. I see some of these women like 6 months. They're like 80,000 followers. I'm like, cool. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. The goal is not followers. You're not here for a popularity contest and vanity metrics. You're here for money. I created my playbook and I sold on LinkedIn and made millions of dollars for my clients and myself and put millions of dollars in the pipeline way before I ever had any content at all. The content is just there to support the outbound you're doing. You don't need a big following. That's not what it's there for. You need it because you're doing emails, you're personalizing outreach. And when people come to the profile, they need to build a little bit of trust. They need to see that you're an expert. They don't need to see that you have good pictures and 100,000 people are following you. They need to see that you can solve the problem that they have. It's about credibility. When it comes to the space we're in, it's about credibility. It's not about following. And that's the biggest thinking error that I see amongst leadership. It's like, well, we want 10,000 people to follow our business page. I'm like, why? And who? And what's the point? What do you want? You want followers? You want money? You want money, you got to do outreach. And that's why I train the teams. So I teach them how to make money, not to get a following.
So let's talk a little bit about this sort of herd mentality in social media, right? Because things trend, people trend. And I guess the question is, first of all, I agree with you, what you just said. But in general, just to kind of double click on that a little bit, do people who get a rise in followers get more followers because is it fed by the algo or is it fed by human emotions? People say, oh, this guy has a lot of follower, this woman has a lot of follower, I'm just going to follow.
I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Yes, I would assume, and this is just me and my own assumptions. I have no math or statistics to back this up, no data here. I would assume that if you saw that 120,000 people are following somebody and you first liked the content that you engaged with, let's say you saw a post, that you'd be more inclined to following them as well, because it seems like, well, everybody else follows them as well. But I don't know. For me, if I like someone's content, I'm going to follow it regardless of the amount of followers they have. I also know how social media works, and I know how followers work, and I know how people get followers from all over the world that aren't in their ICP. And I know how, listen, I could get 100,000 followers, but I would do it inauthentically and it wouldn't be my ICP. It would be the wrong way. So I kind of look at that like, okay, they played the game. Like, I don't look at it and say, oh, like they're doing something right. A lot of times when I look at their content and they have that, I'm like, and then I look at their engagement numbers, I'm like, they did something dirty, because I'm getting 200 to 400 engagements per post with 16, 17,000, somewhere around there. They are getting 100 or less than that, and they have 100,000 followers, right? So it's like, you have to be careful. Perception's reality. I understand that. But when you truly crack into social and you see how that works, it's not real.
So let's go to the other side. And I don't have a sort of a statistically valid conclusion here, but from a personal experience, what I've seen over the last year, maybe year and a half or so, people that I was following, they were putting good content, their followership grew, and they were working for companies. And I see many of them, they hit a certain number and then they quit and then they start their consulting business, right? Have you seen that trend?
Yeah, all the time. It's funny. Like, they'll be doing a really good job. They're a brand ambassador. And this scares corporate, because when I come in and I teach the sales teams mainly, and I'll dabble with the marketing team just to help them a bit, but I teach the sales teams, and leadership will always say to me, how do you find the balance with them creating their own content? Because if I enable the sales team to start creating a little bit and be a personal brand ambassador for their brand, let's say they work for Coca-Cola, I'm just using a big company, and they start creating content for Coca-Cola, and then the sales rep becomes big and starts, like you're saying, amassing a following, getting some attention. Now Pepsi's wants them. Now, now someone else wants them. So how do they handle that? And The honest answer is you ride it for as long as you can as a company. You enable them, you show them how to leverage social selling, they bring you deals. If you treat them really good, hopefully they stay. But maybe that's not their path and that's not their journey. And to be honest, most kids today, the guys in their 20s, girls in their 20s, they're not staying at your company for 40 years. Like those days are done anyway. I think, what is the average lifespan of someone at a company? Like 7 years or something? I don't know. I'm not in HR, but it doesn't seem like it's very long. Maybe 4 years. People switch jobs all the time. So to me, it's like train them, get as much revenue as you can out of them. And then when they're ready to go, let them go. Whether that's because they built a brand and now they're a big deal on LinkedIn, or for some other reason, right? Like maybe they had a kid and they want to stop working for a little bit. Who knows? It doesn't matter. But we have to stop, I think, as leadership, thinking that people are going to be there for the long term, and realize that, okay, here's the present moment. What can we build together right now? And when it's okay if we break up, like it's okay to let employees go and go do something else.
So, on the streaming side of things, I read an
Yeah.
article that how they decide to make something multi-episode or multi-series episodes. And one of the main things that they look at is type of content, because they have enough data now, like Netflix and Prime, to figure out by their audience group, what they like and what they don't like. And but most importantly, the ADD factor of what is happening across the generation, right? Our attention spans are going away. So if I roll that over to the LinkedIn side, so these companies that you're working with, should they be kind of creating a LinkedIn factory, knowing people will go to the other companies, but also most importantly, their audience may be getting tired of them. Therefore, they need fresh people with fresh ideas and fresh content. So instead of worrying about, okay, I'm investing in Joe or Mary, and they're gonna go become social influencer and leave, should they kind of create a LinkedIn factory or content factory where they create 10 of them, knowing maybe 3 would leave, but maybe the other audiences for other 3 would get tired of following and listening to them because they really don't have a lot of original ideas. So do you think companies are thinking that far, or they're not even there?
No. I mean, I love it. You're thinking it. We should talk. They're not. I work with many teams that mid-market enterprise level, and they're just scratching the surface of LinkedIn. They're dabbling with InMails. They're using Sales Nav to send connection requests. They may have done some type of integration with their CRM, and they think they're in good shape, but they have not unlocked LinkedIn's power whatsoever. There is a huge misunderstanding of what LinkedIn can do for a company, and a lack of awareness, to be honest. And that's something I try to teach on LinkedIn, right? I'm trying to lead the horses to water and then make them drink. But yeah, they're not thinking that deep. I will say this though, as a company owner and founder, it is good to enable your team. So if you're leading a sales team, do enable those SDRs to create personal brands. And on the marketing side, support them, which means that your marketing team needs to learn how to create content on LinkedIn. And 99.9% of marketing teams do not know how to do this. Most marketing agencies do not know how to do this. I've worked with hundreds of them. I can guarantee you they don't know how to do this. So getting someone in there who can train them and teach them, like, okay, how exactly should the post be written? What type of content should we be creating? That's going to be important. And then the marketing team should be creating content that the teams can share, not reshare, because resharing posts isn't going to help that much, but share natively, organically to their own profiles. And then, handing that to the SDRs, maybe a post or two a week, and then letting the SDRs do a little bit of their own creative posting. That seems to be a good mix from what I've seen in coaching.
So when you kind of I'm going to the other extreme on the advertising space,
Yeah.
Chelsea, like when you look at major brand like Nike, they
Mm-hmm.
have a framework, and then they fit athletes into that framework, right? Which validates the message of what the brand is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to sort of the new upcoming brand. They try to ride based on personas of influencers, whether it's fragrances or shirts or
Yeah.
whatever those categories are on the consumer side, right? So on the business side of things, do you think people associate with brands, or they predominantly associate with people when they engage?
Oh, people, 100%. Like there's something else you just said before, and I wanted to bring it up. You said brands having an audience. And I'm like, what brands? Like, let's take out Coca-Cola, Amazon, Nike, okay? What brands? Most brands don't have engaged audience following them. Most people are so busy. They're seeing 10,000 ads a day, hundreds of messages every single day, Slacks, emails, LinkedIn, texts, dating apps, whatever. They're not engaged. Most people aren't engaged with anyone, let alone a brand, which has no face. So, yeah, a person 1,000 times more effective. So your founder should be creating content. Your founders, right? They should be the face of the brand, or you should have some reps. Look at Kylie Cosmetics, right? She's the cosmetic brand. She didn't have to do any traditional marketing, nothing. She literally just went live and posted about her lip gloss and sold out in one day. And I was listening to a podcast and her mom was saying like, oh, we have to do all these other traditional things. And Kylie was like 18 and she said, no, I just need to post on social because that's the power of a personal brand. And I can tell you, I don't have anywhere near that level, but I have like 0.01% of that because I have a LinkedIn personal brand and the amount of business it drives for me. So yes, personal brand 100% all the way. Most important thing, people want to connect with people.
So can you double click on that word personal brand? What is it?
A personal brand is when you as a person are the brand essentially. So you're creating the content, you're doing the posts, people are connecting to you and your belief systems and what you share and your expertise and your thoughts that you share and put out in the world. That's essentially to me what a personal brand is. It's a person, not some company that doesn't have a face.
So in case of a company brand, people go through from time to time repositioning of what the company is because they change their product portfolio or their go to market has changed. Now some larger companies like 3M and others, they just categorically stand for innovation, like Apple categorically stand for
Mhm.
innovation, right? Different market segments.
Yeah.
On the personal side, do you see, or have you seen, let's say in 2017, where people have changed their brand or they stick to what they are?
Oh, people change their brand all the time. And I will be honest, in 2017, I was not creating content. That was not even part of what I did. It was all outbound, building pipeline, get deals closed, revenue, revenue, revenue. Content wasn't even a part of it. I wasn't even looking at people's brands. But yes, people change their brands all over social. They constantly pivot. That's just a known fact.
But what do they pivot to? Do they pivot to different personas or pivot to different types of content to get their voice out? Like, what do you see when they change? Because I also, hear about you have to be authentic. People
Mhm.
can figure out whether you're being fake or making things up. So when they go into these other sort of brand modes or brand representation, what do they like? What do they become? What are they trying to do differently?
So there's the person. So I am who I am because I'm very authentic. Like I am who I am, period. Doesn't matter what I'm selling, what services I'm offering, what business I make, what businesses I've had over the years. I've had many. I am who I am, right? So I am my personal brand. My talking points may change based off of what company I'm now involved with. So, for instance, let's say right now I'm running closed and we're doing enablement, outbound enablement, and LinkedIn social selling trainings. Let's say a year from now, I'm now the CRO of a major company, a tech company, a startup. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm representing, now I'm going to go work as a CRO. I'm going to leave my company behind. And now I'm a CRO. And now I'm going to talk about this company. I am not going to change who I am, everything I've shared about being a single mother, being chronically ill and misdiagnosed for over 20 years, my viewpoints, the things I love, like the ocean and surfing, and how I write and who I am. None of that changes. That's me. People like me and they resonate with me. So that's not going to change. But what will change is maybe I'm talking about, some different service that I offer now, or talking about something that might be a little bit different as far as the industry goes that I'm speaking into.
Got it. So you're talking about the person is the same, but
Yeah.
the functions, the offers may evolve. So you
Offers
connect those
evolve.
two dots.
Oh,
So,
constantly. Yeah, like you might offer an audit, then you might offer, a AI product. Maybe I'll build an AI product like everybody else.
so one thing, I'll speak from a personal perspective. I have to kind of force myself to get out there because I'm very uncomfortable. I'm kind of comfortable speaking in public, even in a large audience. I've spoken to like 2,000, 3,000 people. That's not an issue. I sweat a lot before I get on main stage, but it's all dark out there. I'm kind of talking to them and get off, right?
Yeah.
But sharing like personal stuff, what goes on at home, the vacations I take, real troubles, right? Any one of those. And also, my daughter is now 18, and so I didn't want to share any of our kids' stuff. But I see a lot of people do. So when you work with like maybe a stiff like me, like what do you like? How do you get someone like me be sociable in a social media? In real life, I am, but I have an issue getting out there. Like, what is your method?
Let's start with the kid thing. You definitely don't need to share your kids, right? You don't need to share pictures. You can share that you're a dad, and what it's like running a business and being a dad and managing the work life balance, things like that. You can talk about your journey and where you got to where you are. I'm sure you have a very long history and how you got to this point. You could share about wins, failures, struggles. We all have them that are unique to us. We all have our own unique story. And that's what we lean into. It's who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you doing? What thoughts are in your head? You don't have to share your deepest, darkest secrets. Although, if you want to go viral, you might want to.
So when you work, so let's kind of build on that. So when
Yeah.
you work with, let's say, tech companies or manufacturing companies, when you're working with their leadership team,
Mhm.
what is your process? Like, where do you start? How do they typically engage with you? How long does it last? Like, how do they measure results? Can you kind of walk us through that journey?
Absolutely. And to be clear, I'm not creating content for them. That is not what I'm doing. I'm training the sales team on how to leverage LinkedIn and make it a part of their day to day sales outbound plan. So when I onboard with a new company, I bring them in, I have a meeting with key stakeholders and leadership, and we talk about what the team is currently doing. A few things are important. One, I want to know how they're structured. So, do you have SDRs, BDRs, quota carrying sellers? Are you doing full cycle sales? How is it broken up, the prospecting versus, taking the discovery calls, closing deals? We look at that. I look at what is the daily prospecting plan right now. And most importantly, who's holding the team accountable to that daily prospecting plan, because that's very important. Then we look at the buyers. Who are their buyers? Are they on LinkedIn? Where are they? What are they doing? We dig into that. I then meet the sales teams. So sometimes they're split up again, enterprise, mid-market, SDR. However, they split it up. I meet with them individually. I get a feel for their comfortability with LinkedIn, with social selling in general. And I also really evaluate how they communicate. So the most overlooked problem that companies have is that they do not communicate clearly. Maybe I should learn how to say the word. They do not communicate clearly. If they communicated more clearly, the things they were doing on outbound would work. For instance, if they were clearly communicating via cold email and it was personalized, they wouldn't have to spam out thousands of emails. If they were doing one-to-one outreach on LinkedIn, like connection requests and DMs, they wouldn't have to do as much spamming. So I really need to look at too, like, how are they communicating? What's their messaging like when you land on profiles, websites? What is your buyer seeing? Because you only have 5 seconds. You have 5 seconds to grab someone's attention. If it's not clear, they leave. From there, once I look at all that, we start with my 6 C's program where we're clearing up the profiles, clearing up the communication, pulling out lists, so curating lists and targeting specific buyers. If they have a bigger buyer pool, it's different than if they have a niche group and a smaller buyer pool. The strategy is a bit different. We work on how to do community engagement, which is commenting to engage communities and engage people, how to strike conversations, cold email. So I always work in cold email because, listen, and a lot of the people that are listening to this, your people are not on LinkedIn that much. They're not consuming content. They're not scrolling the feed. Like, you're going to have a hard time grabbing a hold of them and getting their attention. That's where cold email comes in, because most of them are checking their email inbox. So we make sure that your deliverability is good, that you're doing one-to-one emails, that when you email them, you only have one chance. You only write, 2 to 3 sentences. And like, what are you supposed to say to crack their attention? And then when you pull them and they go to that LinkedIn page to do their own research, what does it look like? So that all works together. And then the last and final piece is content. We evaluate the content that's on the business page. We evaluate the content that's on the salespeople's pages, and that's it. And then we just go over that. And sometimes they keep me on retainer for a little bit to keep training, and and holding the team accountable, because that's the hardest part.
How long is this process, Chelsea? How long does it typically last once you start to finish? Let's say at least a phase one.
Yeah. So the 6 C's is a 6 part series, which I've crammed into 2 weeks. I've crammed into a workshop, and I've done it short like that. But usually I try to give a team 6 to 8 weeks. So from start to finish, the first 2 weeks will be looking at the leadership, having those meetings, doing the intake, and fixing up the messaging and the profiles. And then we need about 4 to 6 solid weeks to train and enable the team on social selling and leveraging LinkedIn and inserting it into what they're doing now.
So, I mean, when I go to my own personal experience, I used to weigh a lot. I lost a lot of weight, but I had to get there by hiring a trainer.
Yeah.
And I kept the trainers because I knew if I let them go, I would go back to the old self because, it's the last few reps where you have to push yourself. I just don't have it unless somebody's telling me, yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. So when you look at the journey and engagement that you have had with your customer base, do you see a pattern if that people stay with you, they tend to do better, or you see there are people that they can kind of get there beyond a few weeks of learning from you?
So they could definitely get there. To be honest, I tell people it's 3 to 6 months to see results, but if they do the work immediately, they'll call me, text me, like, oh my God, we got 3 meetings booked, like they're all excited. So they'll see the results right away, but they need to make sure someone is holding them accountable. I prefer that not to be me, because it doesn't make sense. I mean, for a little while, it's fine, because then I could work with sales leadership and say, okay, let's sit down doing their reviews. And we do their reviews. These are the questions you need to ask. Here's the system we have in place so you can monitor your team. And I'm fine doing that. But long term, no, it's better if your sales leader is holding the team accountable to a certain amount of metrics. I mean, that across the board should be happening. There should be someone at your business who's holding the sales team accountable to a certain amount of outbound every single day, not just looking at meetings booked. That cannot be the metric.
So let's talk a little bit about metric.
Mhm.
So when you think about from an investment wise, what is a reasonable amount of time people should spend and can spend? And then what do you think they measure as an impact perspective? What comes out of it?
Time wise, your reps should be prospecting. Let's pretend they're not full time SDRs, so their whole job isn't prospecting all day long. No matter what, they should be prospecting 1 to 2 hours a day, period. Like, I don't full cycle sales, you're responsible for selling. You need to be doing at least 1 to 2 hours a day. Bare minimum, I say about like 10 to 20 connection requests, 10 to 20 messages, follow up DM messages that are video messages, those work best. 20 to 30 comments. And then, if you can post a couple times a week, that's great, but it's not required. The other thing you need to do is send cold emails. So 10 to 20 cold emails. Make sure those are clear. All this is personalized. This is bare minimum stuff if you're responsible for a book of business.
So, when I kind of look at my LinkedIn emails, I barely go there because they now put it on other tab or something, right? And when I do go there, I just jump back out because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
So from a LinkedIn based outreach, do you think it has kind of, reached this maximum impact it's kind of done for now? Or like what is happening through that channel?
Well, I advise my clients to never send in-mails. In-mails are a Hail Mary. You send an in-mail only if you've tried everything else. And now it's like, that's it. That's all I got. It's my last thing. I even sent out the carrier pigeons and they're not responding. Then we send the in-mail. Other than that, you do not send in-mail. You engage with people organically. You engage with the business page. You send a connection request. You send thoughtful messages. You do the video messages, which are really important. And then you wait. You have to wait, right? Give people time to respond. Send cold emails if you need to. Do cold calls, handwritten notes, go drop off cookies. Do all the things that you need to do to get a meeting. But don't kill and burn leads with in-mails, and definitely don't spam people, because that's not a good thing either.
So, the general, you made this comment earlier also that 70, 80, 90% of the research is happening online and people kind of coming to you, they pick their top three vendors that they want to talk to. With that sort of as, context, how do you set up meetings? Because they don't want to talk to you because they're deciding what to do. Like, are they in conflict with each other?
No. So you're doing outbound. I'm doing outbound. We do the outbound to get their attention. We shake them. Let me get your attention. If the outbound messaging is good and clear and we solve the problem that they actually have and we press upon that, that's when they go do their own research. And our job is to aid them in that time period when they go do that research. So when I do outreach to someone on LinkedIn or cold email, they then go to my profile. They could see the content I'm sharing. They could clearly understand who I help and how I help them. They could see themselves and the problems they have and the problems I solve in my content and in my profile. I just need to wait. And then from there, if again, the problem they have is one I can solve, then they'll book the meeting or they'll respond. The meeting book is not, I don't go for the meeting book right away. I really don't want a ton of meetings. I can't even handle them. I'm pre qualifying people in those DMs constantly. And then I also pre-qualify people because on my page, on my form, when people do finally get to the point where I even allow them to have the ability to book a meeting with me, it pre-qualifies people and it asks them certain questions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're coming to an end. And sort of one last question. So when you look back at your journey as an entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
If social media was not there, if this is not, the platform you're on, what would you have done? Is there another path you would have chosen?
Well, I started in door-to-door sales. So I didn't start in social media. I was knocking on doors and I was making money doing that. So I was going to make money no matter what. So I did door knocking, cold calling, I did emails, I did it all. I even did direct mail. So yeah, it didn't matter if social media never existed. I'd still be doing all the other stuff I was doing, knocking on doors, cold calling, sending emails. If email didn't exist, I would just keep doing those traditional methods that I did back in the day.
And so today, do you think social media has made it easier for you, like the skills that you had to outreach, or has it made harder, or is it getting harder? Like, where do you think we are, or you are, and it's going?
Oh my God, it's so much easier. Do you know what it's like? Like walking in the 100-degree weather, knocking on strangers' doors and having them slammed in your face, or even worse, going in some creepy person's house because they said yes, and now you have to sit and try to sell them an alarm system. No, it's so much easier. You just get to sit at your computer. Cold calling sucks. People yelling at you and then hanging up on you, like that sucks. Doing this, easiest thing in the world, right? Like you get to just sit at your desk, create content, do outreach, look at other people's profiles, have something of value to say. Like when you were cold calling, you didn't have access. You didn't know anything about Bob or where he went to college or anything he was interested in. Like he was just Bob Smith and you had to call him and try to get him to, stay on the phone with you and then sell them something. So this is easy. Anyone complaining today, like small is violin. I don't have the patience for it. It is the easiest thing to sell. Yes, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of spam. But if you actually get focused and do some personalized outreach, you will rise above all that spam, all that noise, and you will break through in big, big ways.
Wow. Well, with that amazing note, Chelsea, I wanted to thank you for being here. We would
Yeah.
love to have a follow-up session with you. There's so much else to talk about, but thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for listening, whoever stayed on.